So, you want to play Ashes for Ozem. Hello and welcome back to Podfinder. My name is Philip, and I'm here to talk about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. This is the third video in my series on the new Claws of the Tyrant adventure anthology. I suggest watching this series in order, as this video will be specific to preparing players for the Ashes for Ozem adventure, the second story in the anthology. If you're watching this video without having seen the previous two, you might be missing some context. This video will function like all my normal player's guides, providing a spoiler-free look at the setup and themes for the adventure, then giving some advice on builds and character ideas which might be particularly thematic or effective. Getting right into it, Ashes for Ozem is a one-chapter adventure for 7th level characters. The PCs take on the roles of mid-level agents of the Whispering Way, a cult of evil necromancers loyal to the Whispering Tyrant Tar-Baphon. These agents have been given a mission by Seldig Bedless, a commander in Tar-Baphon's armies. The PCs have been tasked with infiltrating a fortress and stealing a religious artifact. In short, this is a heist, plain and simple. Such a mission will require stealth to achieve, but once the artifact has been stolen, the PCs are expected to destroy the fortress on their way out. Beyond that, however, the agents are free to execute on the plan however they want. This feeds into the theme of professionalism, which runs throughout the whole adventure. Ashes for Ozem is a short, sweet adventure, without much in the way of narrative escalation or denouement. The PCs are playing the part of trusted field agents, who will do the job assigned to them without question, and will do it well. They are not expected to get emotionally invested in individual missions, so players should make sure to set their expectations accordingly. At the same time, the PCs in this adventure are unapologetically evil. This is an evil adventure, and players should feel free to embrace the idea of playing the villains, something which doesn't happen very often in published Paizo APs. I already mentioned that this is fundamentally a heist mission, and players should build characters with a few associated skills and challenges in mind. The adventure uses a variant of the victory point system to track the level of awareness which the fortress defenders have of the PC's activities. Numerous options exist for reducing this awareness score, or otherwise bypassing challenges in stealthy or secretive ways. Athletics and thievery will help characters gain access to spaces or locked storage areas. They will also allow characters to disable traps. Religion and society, meanwhile, will prove effective at working out specific details about the various targets within the fortress, as well as the relevant history surrounding the mission. Stealth and acrobatics will also prove effective at accessing restricted locations while avoiding notice, and crafting can supplement thievery as a means of disabling traps and causing property destruction. Arcana and occultism could both prove useful in understanding magical challenges on more than one occasion. And finally, both warfare and Iomide lore may prove useful in a few key moments. If you don't have these particular lore skills, you won't be screwed by any stretch, but it might be fun to incorporate them into your backstory, knowing that they could be important. So, with that high-level understanding out of the way, where specifically do we start in Ashes for Ozem? Like I already mentioned, the PCs in this adventure are mid-level agents of the Whispering Way. They've been summoned to the southern portion of the Fangwood Forest in Nirmathas by none other than Seldig Bedless, the infamous former spymaster of the Ghost King Geb, who recently defected to Tar-Baphon's service for unknown reasons. The adventure begins with Seldig and the PCs meeting in a forest clearing, at which point the legendary Grave Knight details the mission. The PCs need to infiltrate the nearby Fort Ozem. Within the fort is an artifact, which the PCs are tasked with recovering. Once the artifact is secured, the PCs are expected to destroy the fort, both to cause terror and to cover their tracks. While the PCs are able to use any degree of violence they wish to accomplish these goals, Celdeg fears that the commander of the fortress might flee with the artifact if the alarm is raised, so he cautions the PCs to employ stealth and secrecy until they can secure the artifact for themselves. Most importantly, this is not a long-term mission. The PCs have 12 hours to complete their task. Failure will result in Celdeg's disappointment, while success will earn his gratitude. While the Grave Knight is a new addition to Tar-Baphon's forces, he is not a man to disappoint. Still, Celdeg is not so foolish as to send the PCs in unprepared. He does have several tools which they can use to research the fortress, though I won't spoil the specifics of those tools in this video. But what exactly is the Whispering Way? If you've already watched my lore deep dive on Tar-Baphon and his necromantic cult, you've probably got a good grasp on their beliefs. If you haven't, however, or if you simply need a refresher, here's the elevator pitch. The Whispering Way is an ancient cult, whose roots trace all the way back to the Earthfall calamity, and possibly even before. The cult believes that undeath is the perfect form of existence, and that a perfect, prosperous, ordered world is achievable through the powers of necromancy. They believe that undeath is a more efficient form of existence, and that it is fundamentally natural and in harmony with the world. Adherents of the Way believe that society will prosper under their supposedly benevolent guidance. In truth, the philosophy is riddled with internal contradictions, and ultimately boils down to power for power's sake, and the domination of the weak by the strong. Members of the Way tend to see themselves as the smartest person in the room, and they seek to destroy those who disagree with them or stand in their way. The organization derives its name from the prohibitions on how its internal secrets can be passed between members. The secrets of the Way can never be spoken above the volume of a whisper, and should never be written down. The restriction on writing is not absolute, however, and doesn't preclude wizards from scribing scrolls or spellbooks. Adherents of the Way will generally become spellcasters, specializing in necromantic magic. Historically, they are most commonly wizards or clerics of undead deities. The new necromancer class will likely be prevalent in their ranks as well, and bards, undead sorcerers, and bones mystery oracles have been mentioned with more frequency in recent sourcebooks. Non-spellcasters in the organization are often already undead, and usually serve as foot soldiers, bodyguards, or generals, depending on their particular talents. With the broader goal of achieving undeath, most members of the Way are either undead or are working on becoming undead. This might mean that living members are seeking a vampire or ghoul to turn them, or might be working on their own formula for achieving lichdom. Lichdom itself is considered the ultimate form of undead existence, due to the extreme academic rigor required to successfully achieve it. Looking at the Whispering Way at the organizational level, the edicts of the Way are to seek the perfection of undeath, to cleanse the world of the living, and to master the magical secrets of life and death. Conversely, to speak the secrets of the Whispering Way above a whisper, to write down the philosophies of the Whispering Way, or to act irrationally due to concerns for the living are all anathema to the Whispering Way. Though not an explicitly religious organization, it has more than its fair share of fanatical devotees. Numerous branches exist within the philosophy, and internal rivalries are common. For security reasons, the organization is typically broken up into silos, in which different cells of like-minded or similarly trained individuals work semi-autonomously from the rest of the organization. Technically speaking, Tar-Baphon isn't the leader of the organization. He is merely the most powerful and famous member. In reality, however, this is something of a distinction without difference, as no sane member of the Way would ever dream of questioning or defying his authority. Options for player characters. Now it's time to dig into some specific player-facing information you can use to build your characters for Ashes for Ozem. Right off the bat, I've got some high-level notes to consider during character creation. For GMs, I suggest looking at the uncommon or rare character options related to undeath. In particular, the backgrounds and items presented in the Book of the Dead, and to a lesser extent Knights of Lastwall, could all be appropriate for characters who are members of the Whispering Way. Unless you have a very good reason to disallow a particular option, I would suggest allowing most or all of them for your players. At the same time, this adventure is a good opportunity to employ the limited free archetype variant. The free archetype feats might allow players to play into the fantasy of being undead without feeling like they are giving up the power offered by class feats. The undead archetypes presented in Book of the Dead are all good options for limited free archetype, but other archetypes like the cleric or champion to an appropriate deity, the necromancer, once it releases, the reanimator, or the undead master could all be good options to include as well. Players, meanwhile, should be prepared to create 7th level characters. This is a bit more involved than creating the 1st level characters to which most players are accustomed. In addition to making more selections regarding class feats, skill increases, and spells, players will also need to select gear appropriate to 7th level characters. While players can choose to receive a lump sum of 720 GP, then purchase the gear of their choosing, it might be easier to simply use the shortcut which I've outlined here. Using the shortcut, each PC receives a single permanent item of 6th level, 2 permanent items of 5th level, 1 permanent item of 4th level, and 2 permanent items of 3rd level. Each PC would then also receive a lump sum of 125 GP, which they can then spend on consumable items of up to 7th level, or permanent items of up to 2nd level. While considering items and equipment, I encourage players to consider the many flavorful items described in the Book of the Dead. Moving on to the ancestries which players might consider for their characters, I strongly suggest that players really get creative and have fun with it. The Whispering Way is a global organization, so you could really place members of any ancestry in their ranks without much narrative dissonance. At the same time, this adventure is short in scope, with a very short runtime, so you don't really need to worry about how your character might fit in long-term in this region or organization. Do you want to play an automaton, an android, or a particularly far-afield Kashrishi? Here's your chance. Among the Whispering Way, humans are pretty strongly represented, but nearly all other ancestries could reasonably have members in their ranks. Dhampirs and changelings in particular are especially common in the Way. If your player character is already undead, the skeleton is by far my personal favorite option. That said, the zombie, vampire, ghoul, mummy, and ghost could all be options as well. Just ask your GM if they'll be allowing the free archetype variant to free up your class feats before you commit to any undead character concept. Also, please note, the Lich is, unfortunately, not available at 7th level as a character option. Looking at the classes PCs might consider, I'll begin with the combat-focused marshals. The Ranger is probably the strongest option here, and in particular, the precision edge for dealing damage to single targets. The outwit edge could also be effective at recalling knowledge about specific targets. While the fighter will be as effective as ever at dealing high damage, the monk and swashbuckler might be even more effective due to their high mobility, which could be great for infiltration. The summoner could work nicely for getting another combatant on the battlefield, and an eidolon can be dismissed to increase the party's stealthiness as needed. Looking at party composition more broadly, one character should probably cover athletics, and that will likely be the character who serves as the frontliner. Up next are the skill-focused marshals, who, frankly, excel in this adventure. The rogue is probably the best martial class for this adventure, due to its expertise in a wide variety of skills, and its ability to deal burst damage with sneak attack. The thief, scoundrel, and mastermind rackets could all serve well here, with the first focusing on damage, the second focusing on intimidation, and the third on support via recall knowledge. Similar to the rogue, the investigator could perform the skill monkey role very well here, especially by pursuing the target artifact as their lead before the heist begins. The alchemical sciences methodology is probably the best option for this adventure, as the utility it provides could easily come in handy. Speaking of utility, the alchemist isn't a terrible option either, but I strongly suggest avoiding using bombs on a stealth mission. Looking at party composition, one PC should really focus on thievery, and this will likely fall upon the skill monkey, unless your frontliner is dex-based. Looking now at the spellcasters, quite a few options stand out as solid. I'm always a fan of the cleric class, and I actually like the cloistered option for this adventure, since the idea of a war priest on a stealth mission seems a little off to me. If you are playing a cloistered cleric, the cast down feat could be a really solid choice. If instead you like the idea of a wizard, you might need to homebrew a new necromancy school, or just port in the pre-remaster necromancy school from the original core rulebook. The Ancestor or Bones Mystery Oracle could work well in the Whispering Way, as could a sorcerer with the undead or imperial bloodlines. The Witch is a great flexible choice, and the Devourer of Decay, Mosquito, or Starless Shadow patrons could all be very effective on a stealthy heist mission. And, of course, once it's released, the Necromancer class will probably be a good fit for this adventure. Looking at the religious options PCs might consider for their characters, a number of deities of undeath or death are widely worshipped among the members of the Whispering Way. Urgathoa is the biggest and baddest undead deity of them all, and her faith is widespread among even the highest-ranking members of the Way. Zura, meanwhile, is one of the patron deities of Vampire, a role which she shares with Nin. Both of these vampiric deities have gotten some new lore dumps in the recent Shades of Blood AP. Similar to Zura, Cabriri is the patron demon lord of ghouls. Orcus, meanwhile, is a demon lord of necromancy more broadly, though his faith doesn't appear to be particularly widespread. For Agents of the Way native to Tian Sha, Fumeyoshi is the divine representative of undeath within that regional pantheon. His faith might not be common in Avestan, but it might be fun to play with in this adventure. Outside of undead deities in specific, Xiphus, the god of accidental death, and Zon-Kuthon, the god of pain and shadow, are commonly worshipped in the Whispering Way. And, of course, being an evil necromantic cult under the command of Tar-Baphon, members of the Whispering Way should never consider worshipping a few select deities. In specific, for this adventure, players shouldn't worship either Erasni or Iomedae, though really all good deities would be a poor choice for this story. Like most Paizo adventures, Ashes for Ozem doesn't provide custom backgrounds for PCs. Instead, a wide variety of standard backgrounds might prove applicable for members of the Whispering Way. Starting with the common and uncommon backgrounds, more academic or religious members of the Way might have the acolyte, cultist, raised by belief, or occult librarian backgrounds. More martial members, or members who fell into the organization, might come from the criminal, grave robber, hired killer, or warrior backgrounds. Of course, certain rare backgrounds are also applicable to necromantic cultists, and could be fun to implement in this adventure. The blessed, cursed, or chosen one backgrounds could all represent characters whose activities have earned the attention of powerful or maybe even deific beings. Characters blessed by Urgathoa will likely earn plenty of acclaim among the Way. By contrast, defectors from the Knights of Lastwall might have been cursed by their former allies or their patron deities. The returned, revenant, or tombborn backgrounds might all be found among characters who participate in or were raised in necromantic cults. And of course, there are plenty of other backgrounds which might make sense for this adventure, so if you've got something in mind that I didn't mention, just run it by your GM. GM Suggestions, or How Would I Run This? Warning, the following section is intended for GMs only. If you're planning to play this adventure, I suggest stopping this video now. I'll need to discuss some spoilers to properly address my suggested adjustments to the adventure. You have been warned. So, just like most campaigns or adventures, Ashes for Ozem isn't perfect. Of the 3 adventures in the Claws of the Tyrant anthology, I definitely consider this one to be the weakest, but that's probably pretty personal on my part, as I tend to prefer more character interaction than this adventure is intended to offer. Still, I do think the actual mechanics of the infiltration need just a little work. Maybe it's because I just read Pray for Death, which has probably the best infiltration mission in 2E so far, but the fortress map in this adventure feels a little underbaked. I strongly suggest GMs read the rules for infiltration in the GM core and implement some additional hazards, access points, patrols, and other challenges for the PCs to encounter. Alternatively, just read the first chapter of Pray for Death and steal the parts that you like from there. In particular, I like the idea of adding a few additional passages or hazards which might allow access to the fortress, allowing the PCs to take on the role of horror movie villains, striking from the outside, then retreating and leaving little to no trace of their presence before striking again in another location. The element which I feel is best in this adventure is Iomede's Flame, which is a built-in tension meter for the entire mission. PCs should feel the pressure to constantly check in on the flame whenever they encounter a challenge or pass an obstacle. Watching the flame, or finding some way to manipulate it to control the level of alarm among the guards, could be an interesting secondary mechanic for the mission, and I think it provides a lot of narrative potential. One thing I do want to caution GMs about is the relative ease with which inexperienced players can simply lose control of the mission. If the party fails a challenge early on, it seems like the situation can quickly spiral out of control, until the commander of the fort will simply disappear with the artifact, with no reasonable way for the PCs to stop them. This could have some serious implications on the final adventure in this anthology. I do think it's important for the PCs to be able to fail, and to be punished for not taking the mission seriously enough and going in guns blazing. But at the same time, I don't know that the commander should simply abscond with the artifact immediately. I might suggest altering the commander's personality to make her arrogant enough to try to shore up her defenses or call for reinforcements rather than retreating. That would give the PCs a second chance to capture the target artifact, even if they suffer from a few poor rolls early on. The commander can still flee if the PCs continue to perform poorly, but I would run her as a character who sees retreat as a last resort, and as a failure of her command ability. And that about wraps it up for Ashes for Ozem, the second adventure in the Claws of the Tyrant anthology. I appreciate that this is doing something completely different from the first adventure, taking the narrative from survival horror to heist. It's a fun shift in genre, which takes advantage of the nature of an anthology in a way that a conventional adventure could never do. Tomorrow, I'll be covering the thrilling conclusion of this series with Of Blood and Faith, the high-level epic fantasy finale of Claws of the Tyrant. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.